We're going to be doing a 2-inch lift on Aaron's truck here with our greasable shackles and our upper control arms. But regardless of what size lift you choose, the install is going to be very similar. All right, so the first thing we're going to do, we're going to lift it up in the air. However you do that, whether you do it on jack stands, we have a lift here in the shop. We're going to loosen the front wheels, the lug nuts on the front wheels. Remove the lug nuts and wheels. All right, so next we're going to disconnect the sway bar end links from the front lower control arms. The passenger side nut is right here. And then we'll rotate the sway bar down, get it up out of the way. We'll then remove each one of these cotter pins from the upper control arm ball joint. Here we'll remove the castle nut, securing each of these upper control arm ball joints to the upright knuckle. Smack it with a hammer to unseat the ball joint. You can also use a ball joint puller if you have one of those, but we use a hammer. Then you'll rotate the control arm up out of the way. Then we'll remove the nut and bolt securing the bottom of each strut and the lower control arm. So we're going to use a ratchet strap to hold the the lower control arm when we remove this bolt out of the way, just to keep the brake lines, ABS lines from being overstretched. We'll remove the 3 nuts securing the top of each strut assembly to the chassis. We'll remove the strut from the vehicle. Make sure you find your Z1 strut spacers. Remove the 3 nuts. We'll then place the spacer on top of the strut, securing with the supplied flange nuts, and then we'll torque them down to 22 foot-pounds. Strut assembly in the vise, just so we can get some leverage and torque it down properly. Now we're going to use a screwdriver to give us a little leverage to keep it from spinning. All right, so here we're going to install our upper control arms. We'll first need to remove the factory upper control arm. The passenger side is pretty simple. However, on the driver's side, we'll need to loosen up the steering joint. So to get this other one all the way out, we have to remove the steering shaft. We're going to mark it with a paint pen like we've already done, just to keep the alignment done. And we just have to break that 14 millimeter loose. So now that we have the bolt released, we're going to just drop the steering shaft out of the way and be able to pull it out. So we were able to get the upper control arm bolt out. It took us a little finagling around this the shaft universal joint over here, but you know, with a little elbow grease you can definitely get it out of there. And then on the way in, we're gonna go this way, so we don't have to ever fight this ever again. Now we're gonna put the steering shaft back together here and get everything back bolted back up. We have our alignment marks still in. Now it's time to put our FUCA back in place. We have the larger misalignment spacer in the rear. The rear forward, so we don't ever have to take that steering shaft again if we ever need to adjust these. Now we're just putting the nuts back on the upper control arm mounts. We ran the bolts from out in to where we don't have any fitment issues or adjustment issues again. Now these have already been on Simon's vehicle before he Titan swapped, so they already are in spec. But for most people, you just want to kind of take the alignment measurements off your stock ones, line it up close enough to where when you stick them in there, your alignment's not too crazily off. All right, so we went ahead and pulled the tension off of there, just so we can get a jack under here and get some of the tension off of these brake lines while nothing's supporting it. Put the lower shock mount in. Carefully align the top bolts with the chassis. We'll position the strut back into the lower control arm and lift the strut up so the bolts go through the top strut mounts in the chassis. Secure the top strut with the 3 supplied flange nuts and torque everything down to 22 foot-pounds. So now we're going to do the lower shock mount. It's going to go to 98 foot-pounds. So I'm going to go closed in wrench on one side, torque wrench on the other side. So now we're going to torque down the upper ball joint mount to 58 foot-pounds. So now we're going to do the upper ball joint mount on the passenger side. 58 foot-pounds again. So for safety, we just got some new cotter pins. We're just going to slide them back through the hole. We're going to replace the cotter pin and bend them in the wet. Pull this guy back up. And then on to the other side. Now we're doing the upper control arm mounts to the frame, 98 foot-pounds. We got everything relatively within spec compared to the upper arms of the factory, but obviously we're going to want an alignment, but we want to show you how to torque these bolts down properly. You're going to have these 2 pinch bolts up top here, 2 on each side. You're going to walk them in at 5 foot-pounds on each one, going up in 5-pound increments all the way to 20 foot-pounds. So we're going to start with 5 and just work our way up. We're going to start with the further ones out. We start at 5 foot-pounds to 10, 15, and then 20 on each one, going back and forth to give us even clamping force. Then we will tighten the jam nut on the heim joint against the double adjusters and use adjustable wrench or crow's foot. Crow's foot attachment on an extension definitely helps you get the torque in the space that you need to get that jam nut tight against the end to lock in those alignment measurements for you. So we're doing the alignment here at our shop, but make sure if you are using someone that's not familiar with our arms, bring them these instructions just so they are properly aligning our arms. The things to note are these jam nuts and pinch bolts. Make sure these are being torqued properly down. So what we're doing now is we're just going to reconnect the sway bar, swing it back up into position. We'll reconnect the sway bar end links to the lower control arm. All right, so we just connected the sway bar end links back up. Time to put the wheels back on and get her on the ground. We're going to measure our wheel travel to show you the difference stock and then with our spacer lift. So we're going to remove the spring and then just give you some measurements, but this is not part of the install. All right, so we disassembled the strut just so we could show you factory wheel travel. Right now we have it back installed. It's at full droop at factory ride height. So we're measuring 15 3/4 to the center line of the axle shaft from the floor where we sit right now. We're going to jack it all the way up to hit the bump stop. All right, we're completely bottomed out on the bump stop. So we're going to get a measurement again. Center line of the axle is right above 21 3/4, so 21 7/8. Insert math table here. All right, so here's our droop now with the 2-inch spacer on top. 13 and 9/16. Right there. Bottomed out with the strut spacer on top. 21 7/8 again. So we just got the passenger side FUCA on. We're gonna measure it with the 2-inch spacer on top to give us our wheel travel with the 2-inch spacer and our FUCA. FUCA on top with our 2-inch spacer. So now we're gonna measure our wheel travel from this setup here. At full droop, we are right at 13 and 5/8. And our up travel is 21 and 3/8. We gained about a little over an inch in total travel length. Now we are using a fully billet spacer. There are some out there that are cast aluminum or that are fabricated sheet steel. Obviously this is one of the better options for you because you won't have any issues with any fitment or torque strain on your upper mounts. Since we're running the factory wheels still, Aaron wanted a little more aggressive of an offset. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna run some 1.5-inch wheel spacers. We're gonna clean the mating surface. Then we're gonna put on Loctite and then torque everything down in a star pattern to 88 foot-pounds. Don't need a whole lot. So we're gonna end up putting a screwdriver through the rotor, keep it from spinning on us while we're torquing everything down. And then we'll put our wheels and tires back on, torque everything to spec, and lower it back on the ground. All right, so we're gonna install the rear lift shackles. We have the greasable versions of ours. So we're just gonna break these nuts free. We have our axle supported with an axle jack, just to keep it from flopping around. But we're just gonna break these 2/17s loose. If the shackle bolts are hard to remove, you may need to raise or lower the rear differential to remove some of the tension off the spring. So we got our factory shackle out of the way. We're gonna reuse the bushings. And we're just gonna slide the new ones back in place. So we're gonna put it on our lower setting for just the 1-inch lift in the rear. 1.5 would be in the top. So now we're gonna install our Z1 greasable shackles. We're gonna reuse our existing bushings, make sure they are properly seated just so we're not putting anything into a bind. The grease fittings will be on the outer side of the frame. So we pried down the leaf a little bit to get it to line up. And we're just gonna get the bushings back in. We got our bolts. We're just gonna washer. So we're just getting the bushings pressed back in here. Just enough to be able to put it back under its own weight. And then once we get it down again, we'll get it torqued to spec. And then grease. So we're gonna repeat this process on the other side. On the passenger side. So we got everything torqued down to spec. Now we're just gonna throw some grease in there. Oh, so we got it back down on the ground. Everything's torqued to spec. Lift is done, rear shackles are done. Now it's off to the alignment rack to get everything in spec. So with this application, we're running obviously a larger tire and wheel spacers. This will be taken on a case-by-case situation, but with the factory fender liners and going with a larger tire, most likely you're going to need to trim a little bit of the plastic. And we also did a little bit of melting around the fender liner to give us a little extra clearance with these tires.